Thank you all again for joining me on another episode of The Art of Comic Writing. I'm your host, Jorge Medina. That's George with a J. And today we're going to be chatting with a very talented writer. He wears a lot of hats. He's a producer, he's a photographer, he's a director. He does a lot of things. He has a company called W9, which I will talk a little bit more about coming up. But he's on the show, and we're going to be talking to him about a topic that I actually tackled on an earlier episode. If you haven't seen it, check out the interview I did with James DeSantis. Okay, the information is going to be in the show notes. And in that episode, we talked about editors and how much power do we, as writers, do we give or should give to our editors? I always think it's an important topic, and I also think we should be open to criticism. So I like to talk to my fellow writers about this and get different perspectives. Is it a personality thing, maybe, or maybe a confidence thing? Well, in this interview, I want to discuss with him feedback and how does he and or should we take the feedback? Stick around for this one because I think it's one that you will find interesting and informative. Plus, if you have watched this show before, you know what we are going to do at the end, and that is the writing prompt. I'm going to give him a writing prompt, so stick around for that. Okay, so without further ado, please help me welcome someone who, besides being a writer, is also an award-winning filmmaker and comic book creator, producer, director, photographer, editor, sound designer, and marketer. He's the owner and operator of Warehouse 9 Productions, a company that employs writers and artists from all over the world to complete film and comic book projects. His films include Cofour Extraordinaire, Waiting for Negroes, The Unmentionables, The Last Resort, and Hunting for Fish. His graphic novel, Bob, Non-Union Psychic, The Big Book of Bob, Volume 1, is available now. The information will be in the description below. Here he is, everyone, Lance Lucero. How are you, Lance? Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Oh man, thank you. I'm excited to have you on the show. We were talking before we started actually the recording process. The last time I spoke to you, you were on a show with us on Catch the Craze. This was I think maybe a few years back now.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a
Yeah,
minute.
it's been
Yeah.
definitely been a minute. Definitely been a minute. But again, thank you so much for coming on. For those watching, we are going to be having a conversation about writing with Mr. Lance Lucero, and I'm gonna have a questions that I prepared for him. We're gonna go into those questions. Before he leaves, I'm going to leave him with a little writing prompt. He has no idea what the writing prompt is. It's going to be a little surprise. And you guys can get in on that writing prompt as well. Make sure that, listen to the writing prompt. If you are ever stuck with an idea or something like that, maybe use that as just like almost like what artists do with sketches, like warm-ups. It would be something good to do. But all right, so we're gonna get right into it, Lance. First question that I prepared for you here, and a lot of it is gonna be talking about just editing and the editing process and all that other stuff. So let me start by asking you this: when you sit down to write, right? Other than maybe the title of the story, what is the first thing you write down?
I start from the beginning.
Mm,
I start from the absolute beginning. I need to know how I'm going to get to the end, but I always have the end in mind.
right.
So I'm not going to write myself into a corner.
Huh.
So I started at page one, line one, whatever it is,
Yeah.
screenplay, comic book, location. Let's introduce this story. So I want to start from the beginning. I think in a linear mode.
Right.
I'm not fragmented about my structure or where this or the direction of where the story is going to go.
Hmm.
I usually have it planned, but the moment I sit down, I start absolute beginning and I fire it on from there.
Do you have do you prepare an outline to help you with that?
Yes, I have a basic outline of
Mm,
how it's going to unfold. If it's comic books, I take if it's a 30-page comic book,
mhm.
25 to 30-page comic book, I like to follow the 30-minute episodic television format for comic books. I think
Interesting.
it's a good way to pace things out. And I work it out into what's going to be the opening page, how you're going to reveal the characters, the environment. I get into the plots. A few pages in, I get into the subplots. And then I try to work out the body, put the meat of the story in there.
Yeah.
and then wrap up the subplot, and then do the climax, and then a resolution. I mean, I have an idea in my head of what the structure should be. I mean, it isn't so regiment that you can predict what's happening per page, but it keeps me in the right direction. It keeps me focused, and it keeps me so that I can keep developing the essential points of the story.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you have everything almost like in sections because I feel like for me, I need stuff like that. I need that. Yeah, like you said, it's not regimented. It's almost like it's a blueprint that you can kind of deviate from if you need to, but at least it's there to get you going. Because I think the hardest thing sometimes is when there's so much commotion, being able to tell a story that people are going to understand. Because if you're confused, imagine your audience, right? They're not going to know what the heck you're talking about.
Right, right. And there are
Right.
times where I can have that outline modified, I don't know, 2, 3 weeks before I actually sit down and say, I'm ready to tell this story. So
Right.
if it's anything that I let stew, it's the outline, it's the structure, it's the format, it's all that stuff. So when
Yeah.
I sit down, I execute.
Right.
All every ounce of time matters.
Mhm.
So I can execute, get that on paper, get it
Yeah.
done, and then let the draft stew for a minute.
Yeah. That's good, man. That's good. How many drafts do you go through before you are happy with what you've got?
The first drafts usually look like a final draft, believe it or not.
Hmm.
But I go for three. I think three is the
Okay.
magic number. If you don't get it in three, you got to really think about it. Something's wrong. But normally, I don't go beyond three drafts.
Really? So what do you have in your? In other words, can break down those three drafts. Like, what are you looking for in each one?
Usually, beyond the initial story, beyond the initial structure, the development of the first draft, I need to make sure everything is there.
Hmm.
I need to make sure all questions are answered so that people hopefully enjoy the story. And then I pass that draft on to some trusted colleagues to say, okay, does it make sense? Is there anything weird? Is there anything goofy? If that plays out well, then whatever modifications that I need, I make in that second draft, and I say, okay, I think I got enough input to round this out. And then the third draft is absolute fine tuning and getting it ready for production to
Right.
say, okay, this is the draft that everybody's going to see. This is the draft that's going to land on certain tables, or go to the artists, or go to the actors, or go to the
Mhm.
production crew. It's that third draft that everybody sees.
Yeah. 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 No, it's good to have your definite number because you could be editing for days. You can be editing forever. Like you could just sit there and nitpick your story till it never gets made. In a comic book, for example, right? You send it to your artist. Your artist draws the pages. Maybe there's an expression that's a little off. Make that change, or do you say, oh, wait a minute, that kind of works a little better? Let me adapt the dialogue to that drawing that I have in my hand. How does that work for you?
Well, I think even when I hand the finished draft to the illustrator, they're now the director. They're now the
Hmm.
person that's going to dictate how it's going to be laid out. So we get a rough layout first, just really scribbly rough to see if we're going visually in the right direction, and it seems to be right.
Right.
We discuss anything that might look weird so that he doesn't have to redo pages or panels. And then we get into the actual, pencils, inks, everything is looking great. Um, that's when you begin to see new opportunities present itself.
Right.
So yeah, you have a finished draft of a script, but then you may think, well, hey, this art speaks for itself, so let's get rid of the dialogue.
Hmm.
We don't need it there. Let's the story's progressing. Um, that's necessary for the production. Ego aside, it's covered. Sure, I may think my words are fantastic, but if it doesn't need to be there, get rid of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You may see, oh, this dialogue works better for this character, so let's swap the dialogue balloons.
Nice.
We see opportunities present themselves. It's nothing dramatic, but it's enough to say, all right, when I have that third draft, it's loaded. It's loaded what I feel is needed to go into production. And by the time the finished product is there, it can change. It can change.
Nice.
It's not dramatic, but you trim the fat. Or, hey, wouldn't it be great to add these new lines? Or wouldn't it be great to add this narration for comic books? For the film editing side, it's like the story's visual. We don't need anything else. Let's just use sound design. So it's always a work in progress until you wrap it up, until it's done. When it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And no regrets. You say it's finished and you put it out to the world.
Yeah. No, that's great advice, man. And I love to hear how it translates even into film, right? With the artists, what the I should say with the actors or the actresses, if they want to ad lib something that maybe is in the scene that wasn't in the script, but now it's, like I like that there is that flexibility. I guess there has to be, right? Because like you said, it starts coming together. The story now is starting to like, you guys are giving it life. Um, do you and I guess you answered this question, but so you use an editor, right? How much control do you give up when you use an editor?
Well, for the comic books, for Bob, Adam Foley was my co-writer and my editor. He was the guy that kind of knew his way around comic books until I learned. And then it was like, okay, we can agree and disagree on what is necessary to progress the story forward. I think it mostly comes from a technical side,
Yeah.
and the input's always there. It's I'm warehouse 9. It's the last word is me. I have to make the decision, yes or no,
Right.
or take the risk. So bottom line, I get the input, but ultimately I have to pull the trigger. I have to say, hey, I'm committed to going this way, that way, or agreeing upon what we wanted. And the responsibility falls on my shoulders. And as a creator, you take that responsibility. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to do that. I think we've had enough discussions on the editing process. Now let's just progress forward. So, there's input.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I got to take responsibility. I got to say, this was the decision made. There's no blame game.
Yeah.
I'm the guy at the top of the pyramid. So if anything goes wrong, it's ultimately my fault.
Right. Right. Because you either signed off on it or whatever it was. I mean, you're the one who has to sign off, especially when you're running a business, obviously, like this. Is feedback difficult to take as a writer for you? Do you find that difficult?
Not at all. Not
No.
really. I mean,
Good.
if it's something's not right, it's not right. Obviously, I run things past a lot of people always daily. Like, hey, what do you think of this joke? Did this joke fly? And then
Yeah.
they may like, dude, that joke's pretty good, or how about this joke? And then the big groan. All right, okay, maybe that one doesn't work out right.
Right.
What if I do something totally radical? What if I just do something that people don't expect because of the entertainment value? Not to be clever, but does this look pretentious? Does this look contrived? And I get the feedback that I think is necessary, and sometimes it is. Yeah, it's a little cliche. All right, then I'm not doing it. Or wow, I didn't see that coming. All right, I got you. So
Hmm.
I'll just keep creating, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's. I mean, what are you gonna do, right? Like you have to keep creating. I think at that point, feedback aside, I think I don't. For me, I don't think that it's difficult to take as a writer because I think you have to, take the feedback and do with it, what you want at that point, right? You're either going to take it or you're not going to take it. If you're not going to take it, then you better have not that, I don't want to say you better have. I think there's a reason why it wasn't taken. And I think to your point earlier about you're the final say, right? Even if you didn't have Warehouse 9, even if you are the writer, you're the creator of a book, you're putting it out yourself, it's your decision at the end of the day. And I think that in collaborations, I feel like when you're collaborating with somebody, you have to know whose story is it, who created the story, and that person has the final say. And I think that's important when collaborating, understanding that. And again, egos aside, like you mentioned, egos aside.
Right, right, right. I mean, if you're worried about that much control, then I think
Mm,
it's a disservice
yeah,
to the end game. Um, I mean, obviously, I have complete control over all of it, but you got to allow new opportunities to present themselves. You have to. It keeps it fresh during the production process as
right,
well.
yeah, yeah,
When you get these new ideas, and it's not going to change anything radically, but it's a great idea. I can definitely say, yeah, I didn't think of that. Good job. Awesome. Let's go with it.
right,
It's a
right,
team effort.
yeah. No, at the end of the day, yeah, absolutely, you're absolutely right. And listen, I definitely want to. I'm loving the feedback talk because I think that again, I talk about this a lot, like, and I've had conversations with other artists about the ego, right? Like leaving the ego at the door and putting that aside, because at the end of the day, it's about that end product, and you want that end product to be the best it's going to be. And sometimes we get in our own way of doing that because we think it should be one way, or we. Now, I'm not saying if you believe in what you're doing and you really believe that that's the best way to go, then go for it. Do what you got to do. That you also have to be able to stand and say that. But I definitely want to find out what happens when you disagree with the feedback. So we're going to take a little break here, and on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about what happens when you disagree with the feedback, and maybe if you have any stories about when it's actually happened. So we'll be right back, and we'll talk about that. Welcome back, everyone. I am sitting here with Lance Lucero, and we're talking about writing. And one of the topics we were talking about was feedback and how difficult it is to take as a writer. We talked about, why, we should be open about taking it. But I guess my question now is, what happens when you disagree with that feedback? Or, in other words, how would you, I guess, advise somebody to take the feedback, and even if you disagree with it, what are some of the things that you can do? Because again, we are working with other individuals here. It's a group, it's a group thing here. It's not, you're not individually, unless you're doing it by yourself. But if you're working with others, when there's feedback given, what happens when you disagree with it, Lance?
It's interesting. I remember once when for the first Bob book, I had a specific design concept in mind for the main creature, the Hux, and it was written down. And then we get the concepts from our amazing illustrator Francisco Resendez, and it was completely different. And I was like talking to Adam behind the scenes, going, "So what's the deal with that? That's not what I want."
Ooh.
He's like, "Well, let me." He was kind of handling that editing book. He was the moderator at that time. I was like, "Well, let me ask what was up with that." I mean, it wasn't a bad concept though. It was still pretty cool. We ended up going with it, but I'm like, why isn't he following this? It kind of plays out later in the story.
Right.
And we got another variation, which was almost the same. It wasn't that different. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? We're not making any progress. And then Adam was probably like, I think it's a subtle way of him saying he doesn't want to do it. And I'm like, if the art wasn't that as good as it was, I would have probably pulled rank, and said, no, do it like this. But since it was pretty dang cool, and I think, well, this is, you get used to a concept and you hold on to it. I was able to let go of it and say, you know what, let's go with this. I think we can work this out. I think it's going to be cool. And it ended up being that way, and it survived, throughout the series. So I was a little miffed, but it was good. So I thought, let's roll with it. And he's doing a good job. So why make a fuss?
Right.
That always is in my head. Like, why wasn't it my original concept? Why wasn't it my original concept? But I can't complain. It worked out fantastic, and I went with it. But it did bend me out of shape at first. But he is now the director. I am the producer.
Gotcha.
If I think of it in movie terms,
Yeah.
I handed him this book, and now he is creating the look. We agree on the look. We do the conceptual designs, the color patterns, everything. But ultimately, he's the director now. So it is primarily visually his vision.
Right.
So that was an eye opener for me, to finally not be the guy that's wearing all the hats. But refreshing to know he's got it. So I'm gonna take a step back and just let him do it.
Now, you mentioned that your initial thought was but it's going to play out later on. That's the reason. The reason why I did it this way is because it's going to play out later on. Does it still play out the way you wanted it to play out? Did he just go a different way about it? Is that what happened here?
I'm not sure. It was to the point where, okay, do we need to keep beating this to death? Let's progress.
Right.
And that little story element, it can change. It isn't detrimental to the character or the storyline.
Right.
So let's go with it and see how it plays out. And I can see his idea of it in the third book when we reintroduce the creature again.
Mm-hmm.
It is modified, kind of like the way, let's say, if you are a werewolf, you still kind of have your own look at times, like you see in movies. They look somewhat like the actors or whatever. I thought, oh, okay, I kind of see how if a person embodies this creature, how he's modifying it a little bit. So he must have had his own agenda. I never beat it to death. It was working.
Mm-hmm.
I took a back seat and said, let him go with it. And success, it worked out.
Yeah, I think sometimes when stuff like that happens, especially when you give an artist the green light, you unlock something else, right? You unlock his or her full potential at that point. Because I think if you would have said, no, we're gonna go with what I wrote here. I wrote it for a reason. This is the way it should go. Maybe you don't get what you're getting now. Maybe you get a more watered down version of your artist because now he feels like, all right, I guess I'll just follow direction. I'm just here, just follow directions, and you know what you're doing.
Right, and I think that's detrimental. So
Yeah,
it's like you let them perform. You just let it happen. And honestly, if it's working out, it's a thrill. It's as thrill as it is. So don't kill the thrill. My ego isn't going to get in the way of the thrill. It's not going to get in the way of the process and the fun. All right, I can bend there. Come on, I already created it. I already wrote it. I'm already doing everything. It's fine. My name's all over it. I don't need that. It's okay. Let's let people shine.
Right. That's awesome, man. Now. How long have you been working with this artist?
Oh, from the very beginning. Heck, we're
Really?
probably going on almost 10 years now.
Jeez, dude. See, that's amazing. That's amazing. So I know I mentioned you call it the what is it? It's volume one. Are there more than one volumes?
Yeah,
In
we have three other books written. We haven't gone into production on them for
Okay.
volume two, and a spin-off, another comic book spin-off.
Sweet.
So they're all ready. They're production ready.
Yeah.
I've been promoting this volume. It's
Mhm.
gaining steam, traction, and primarily focusing on the films. So when we did Coiffier Extraordinaire, Waiting for Legros, that's my commercial for this book. It's the spin-off of the book.
Nice. Okay. Because I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you if you thinking about adapting it to film, but you have a spin-off version of the book.
Yeah, it's not a direct adaptation because you can't give it all away. It's a
Yeah.
component of the books, but it ties into the book perfectly. So you read the book, you watch the movie, you'll get it. You watch the movie, you read the book, you'll get it.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm not using the main character. I'm not using the main elements, but I'm using a component of it, saying this is a very important character. So let's have a look at it. Let's have fun, but let's not spoon feed it to the audience. You know what I mean? Let's give
Yeah.
them something to guess about.
Yeah. No, good job. Good job. Yeah, man, that's great. That's great. Well, listen, Lance, I have one final question for you. Okay. And this is the bonus question. The bonus question is, what's your favorite YouTube channel and why is it Get Your Meds?
Because it's awesome. You get all the information you need. You got a great host.
There you
You
go.
know
That's
what I
what
mean?
keep it going. Keep it
That's
coming,
easy.
Lance.
All right. He has a nice hat. It's fun. Come on.
No,
Let's go
man,
here, people.
you're the man. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Before you leave, though, I am going to leave you with a little partying gift. It's going to be the writing prompt. Okay. And the writing prompt is going to be a cafe and 3 college friends. Do with that what you want. A cafe and 3 college friends. Why are they there? Why are they meeting there? What happened? How do they meet? What college do they go to? I don't know. Whatever you want. It's a cafe. It could be anywhere in the world. whether it's, France, whether it's, New York City, California, Denver, wherever you want, a cafe and 3 college friends. 15 minutes, write down whatever comes to mind in those 15 minutes. Use it as a warm up if you're ever stuck writing a story. And if you want to share, share. But you don't have to do it now, obviously. You can always do it when you have a chance. But Lance, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for those great, great anecdotes and for coming on and just talking writing with me, man. I appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great, and just keep rocking, man.
I appreciate
This
you.
is important. This is important.
I appreciate you. And if I'm ever in Denver, I'm going to hit you up. I'm going to try not to get sick out there with the altitude. But
You'll be fed well, but I won't. I won't make you suffocate.
Lance, thanks so much. I appreciate you, man.
All right. Thank you much.
And that, my friends, was Lance Lucero. So, what do you think? What happens when you disagree with feedback? Put it in the show notes. Have you had instances where you completely disagree with the feedback? Did you go ballistic? Did you kind of try to find the middle ground where you're a little more mellow? Did you turn a negative into a positive, similar to what Lance did? He had an issue with, an artist who maybe wasn't too keen on what he was, doing with the story and decided, I'm going to go a different way. And his way of giving him the feedback was, I'm just going to go a different route. And eventually things were figured out. And now he has a successful book. What's your story? How did you do it? How did you handle that? So don't forget to throw that into the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, guys. Thank you so much to everyone who has been watching the show, who has already subscribed to the channel. Share it. Share this with your friends. Share this with other writers. Let's get the buzz going. Let's get the buzz going about the show. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed, like I mentioned. And don't forget to share it, like, comment, hit the notification bell so that you know when I'm going on. These shows aren't live, so you want to know when they are put up on the channel. I try to do them weekly. That's what I've been doing. I've been consistent with that, so make sure you check me out. Don't forget, there's also a writing prompt on this show. The writing prompt is a cafe and 3 college friends. What happened? Why are they at this cafe? What's going on? Write it down. Use it, like I always say, use it as a warm up. If you're stuck trying to write something, sit down and just type away at that. Nobody's going to read that unless you want me to. Send it over. My email address will be down below. Don't forget that Lance's information is also in the show notes. Everything that he's doing, the most recent stuff is on there. So check it out. Give him a follow on his social media platforms and support his book. It's also down there in the show notes. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. I will be back next week with another guest. In the meantime, keep writing. Peace.